Hi, my name is Mike Bonner, and I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Technology for St. Clair Systems. Today, we'll be talking about our process optimization program. We say it's what gives our projects the pop you're seeking. This system creates a well-defined and structured approach to the implementation of temperature control in your coil coating process. The process optimization program is a focused approach to identifying and exploiting the key improvement opportunities specific to your operation that drew you to implement temperature control in the first place. The program is centered around developing and implementing specific steps for achieving immediate and lasting gains in those key areas. The steps are easy and intuitive. First, we identify the top 2 to 3 opportunities for improvement. Then, we define the methods to measure each opportunity, the metrics by which they'll be judged. Next, we establish a baseline of current operating conditions. And then we analyze that baseline data to identify improvement targets. Once those targets have been identified, we develop approaches to achieve desired outcomes for each metric. Then we implement customized procedures and training for each approach during the system commissioning. Next, we measure the results and we compare those to the improvement targets to make sure that we're meeting our goals and objectives, and then we follow up to reinforce the optimization. So now let's look at each step in a little greater detail. In the first step, we jointly identify the top 2 to 3 opportunities for process improvement that will have a significant impact on your business. If necessary to meet the required ROI schedule, this can be stretched to 4, but too many becomes confusing and difficult to manage. Obviously, we focus on those areas over which temperature control will have an influence. Though dirt may be your number 1 defect, it may not make the list as it only indirectly is related to temperature variations in your process. As cost is generally the primary criteria against which these objectives are judged, they often come from our ROI calculation worksheet. We generally divide these into 2 categories: process improvement opportunities and quality improvement opportunities. Fortunately, the ROI analysis tool includes operational gains as well, so we can take that data and use simple statistical tools like Pareto analyses to make the decision on the group that makes the final cut. Process improvement opportunities are usually associated with reducing very direct costs like solvent usage or material consumption, often referred to as mileage. Reduction in color change time is also a common target. This is important because it results in increased capacity from the coating line, and if the market can support it, that means greater revenue per month, quarter, or year. In some cases, the addition of temperature control allows products to be coated at a faster line speed, which also increases line capacity by increasing throughput. Quality improvement opportunities are associated with reducing defects. Defects commonly associated with coating temperature variations include blisters, especially edge blisters, low film, off color, which is often associated with low film, and even gloss issues. Of course, reducing quality defects also reduces cost by reducing rework and scrap. This allows you to take your product directly from the recoiler to the shipping dock. And if you're not wasting time on rework and scrap, you can spend that time running saleable product. And again, this means increased capacity from your coating line, and that means an upside revenue potential. The next step is to define the best way to measure each of these opportunities. In other words, attach a metric to them. This is essential if we're going to be able to track the magnitude of the operating and quality improvements and cost reductions we've realized through the implementation of temperature control. These metrics must be objective, based on hard traceable numbers, but generally fall into 2 categories: cost and quality. Fortunately, in most cases, these are readily available from existing manufacturing management reports, quality management reports, and accounting reports. In some cases, it may be necessary to establish some form of direct logging of a specific metric, but this can usually be accomplished with minimal impact to the operation. Once the metrics and measurement methods for each target improvement opportunity have been established, it is essential to get a baseline, a picture of these metrics as they exist in the non-temperature controlled operation. If the justification for the project came from SCS's ROI calculation tool, this baseline may already be contained within the data used to complete this calculation. If not, or if some of the metrics are thought to be outdated or incomplete, We can use that 8 to 12 week period between the release of the purchase order and the delivery of the equipment to track the data and establish this baseline. With the baseline data in place, we then analyze this body of data to determine what gains we believe we can achieve in each category. We set both performance and financial targets. It's important to be conservative with these estimates. Success is more important to the well-being of your team than slamming the goal out of the park. Each success drives them to more readily accept the next project. That being said, it's equally important that the total of the targets meets the total ROI, for this is the ultimate criteria by which you and your team will be judged on the next project you submit. In most organizations, a project with a marginal ROI submitted by a team with a track record of successfully bringing projects in on time, on budget, and meeting their ROI projections will get the nod over a project with a more aggressive ROI submitted by a team with a track record of issues or failure. Using the baseline data and the improvement targets set forth for each objective, the next step is to develop the means by which to implement the changes required to meet these goals and objectives. The plan should include new procedures that will need to be followed. Equally important is how this is communicated to the team. They've done things the same way for a long time for a reason. Given the constraints they face, they work. It's essential to get their buy-in to these changes to assure that they don't fall back into their old routines when the going gets tough. Next is training. Though the changes may be subtle, it's still important to properly train every member of the team to assure that everyone has the same understanding of the goals and objectives and how these changes will enable them to be met. It's important to remember that the implementation of temperature control introduces a new tool to help your team achieve these goals, but it's just a tool, not a silver bullet. Much of the training on the operation of this equipment is already canned and included as part of the system commissioning process, but this must be tempered to include the key points important to your specific application. Equally important to assuring that your team doesn't fall back into their old routines is a structured pattern of tracking and reinforcement to be sure that the new procedures are being followed, especially on the off shifts. We have all heard Einstein's quote that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And when you say it, everyone agrees, but we're creatures of habit. And it's always easier to fall back into what we've always done just for this one important order. If everyone was communicated to properly and buy-in was achieved at the outset, it will be much easier to make the correction when these instances occur. A plan for follow-up tracking is essential to the success of the project. If a careful plan has been assembled, the implementation should be smooth and easy. Yeah, right. We all know that change is difficult, but a well-conceived and well-communicated plan will make this change much easier. It is important to involve the team during implementation and stick to the goals and objectives. Stay the course. That being said, if the team has a better idea, ignoring it and shutting it down for the simple reason of staying the course can be as catastrophic as not following a plan at all. A good example is often found in system cleaning and the color change process. We have very well-defined cleaning procedures that we introduce as part of the operator training. Cleaning is important because it's related to both product quality and system longevity, and we always try to teach it what we call the right way. But in virtually every implementation that we do, the operators have tricks and tips that they've developed over the years to work in their environment. We've learned to always endeavor to work with them to make sure that the outcome is optimized for both the equipment and the process. These guys are experts for a reason. Once the equipment has been installed and the team has been trained, the next step is to monitor the metrics to assure that those goals and objectives set forth are being achieved. First, set a defined period for tracking the metrics after the install and commissioning. It's important to remember that some things will change quickly and others will take more time. A 90-day window is always a good bet. Once the data has been collected, it must be compiled so that it can be compared to the targets set forth for each metric. This is easy because these were well established early in the program. Again, tools like graphing and Pareto analyses are key to this analysis. For those metrics that take time to accrue, a well-constructed graph is often the best way to show that, in spite of a slow start, the metric is coming in line with expectations. Above all else, assure that enough of the metrics are meeting or exceeding target to assure that the published ROI will be met. We all know that nothing ever goes as planned, and in even the best conceived plan, there are bound to be at least one or two metrics that are not meeting the target we set forth. Maybe the procedures and process changes were inadequate to meet the expectations. Maybe the training was unclear or inadequate. Maybe the target was ill-conceived. Regardless, this is the time to reevaluate the goal, the procedures, and the training, and to make the changes necessary to get the metric back on track. This is generally done with SES prior to the follow-up reinforcement visit. The final step in the handoff process is marked by a visit by the same SES team that worked with you throughout the project. Armed with a 90-day result analysis, the first step of this visit is to meet with the project champions to review progress and the overall feeling surrounding the project. The 90-day window is a good one in that the newness of the equipment will have worn off by then and the new procedures will be taking hold. Any issues encountered during that time can also be addressed directly. Understanding any issues or shortfalls, the proposed changes can be reviewed with the team and implemented. Because of the team's newly developed expertise with this new tool that is temperature control, the changes implemented here are often much easier than those implemented during the commissioning phase of the process. Still, it's important to set the monitoring back in place to assure that these changes become the norm. Based on our experience, by this point in the process, the team is feeling pretty good about their achievements, and a celebration, however modest, is in order. Including the process optimization program as part of your temperature control system implementation is a good way of ensuring the success of your capital project. The focus on the implementation doesn't end with the install and commissioning. It continues on to assure that you meet the ROI, quality, and operational targets that were the foundation of the project approval in the first place. Often, additional unforeseen improvements and cost savings accrue that far exceed initial expectations, which is a good reflection on you and your team. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. I hope that this has provided you food for thought, raised questions pertinent to your operation, and helped you to understand how we can be so confident that you will be successful when you take on implementation of temperature control in your process. If you'd like to know more, I encourage you to contact us at www.stclairsystems.com.